everyone and welcome to my channel, Limitless Lauren. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 different dinner/lunch recipes that you can make in your Power Quick Pot or Instant Pot. These work for either one of those. These are going to be one-pot meals, very easy, somewhat healthy, and I'm going to be making mine all dairy-free. I will also give alternatives. If you're not dairy-free, that's okay. These can have cheese in them, milk, butter, whatever. I think that's all I want to say, so let's jump into the first recipe. First recipe that I'm going to be making is the Zuppa Toscana. So the recipe I'm going to be going off of is a site, Beauty in the Bench Press. And of course I will link all the recipes I use below to give them credit, because these are not my recipes. Now, this recipe is usually made with heavy cream, but we are dairy free. I found a recipe that caters to that, and they use coconut milk instead. So if you don't want coconut milk, you can always use heavy cream as a substitute. Let's take a look at the ingredients you're gonna need. So we got the coconut milk. I'm gonna need 6 cups of chicken broth, which would be 48 ounces. So I'm gonna be using this whole thing. We're going to need some oil, whatever kind that you choose, and that's just to saute with the meat. So I'm going to be using olive oil. You're going to need some Italian seasoning and Italian sausage. You can get whatever kind that you want. We got mild because we do have a toddler that's going to be eating it. You're going to need some red potato and red onion. The recipe calls for white onion, but we like red onion, so that's what I'm going to use. And I cut these up earlier just to save some prep time for myself. And I used about 6 or 7 of the little red potatoes. I don't think I'm going to be using all this. It calls for half a cup of red onion. Last thing that you're going to need is kale. And optional ingredients to put on at the very end. Some bacon and crushed red pepper. And she also suggested parsley too, but these are the ones that I have. First step is to saute the meat. So we have a little saute button right here. And we'll put it on beef. And we'll just click OK. I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil in there. In goes the sausage. I forgot to say this in the beginning. You're going to need some minced garlic or garlic powder, whatever works. It calls for a tablespoon, and we're just going to saute this for just a couple more minutes, not too long. We're going to turn off the saute mode, and we're going to add the chicken broth. You can also use vegetable broth or whatever broth that you prefer, bone broth even, for more protein. And we're going to add in the potatoes. The last thing we're going to add is the Italian seasoning. I'm just going to add a bunch on here. Now we're going to put on the lid, lock it up. We're going to pressure cook and custom on high, but we're going to do a different time. We're just going to do 10 minutes and start. While that is cooking, I'm going to cook the bacon. So what I do is bake 350 degrees. I cook it for 10 minutes, flip it, cook it for another 10 minutes, then it's done. Easy. And if you are new to the Power Quick Pot or Instant Pot, whatever you're using, so when you do pressure cook, it takes a while for it to come to pressure. So when it starts to heat up, you're going to hear a loud hissing noise, like steam building up in here. So you don't want to touch it, just leave it alone. It's normal to have it sound like it's gonna blow up. Basically, it's kind of a scary sound when it's coming up to pressure. But once it's fully at pressure, it'll stop the hissing noise and it will start counting down the timer. So it's not 10 minutes from when you press the go button. It starts the 10 minutes after it comes to full pressure. Now for how to prep the kale. There is different kinds of kale, and this is one I've actually never used before. It's called lacinato kale. Taylor picked this out. But all kale is pretty tough. So what you want to do is wash it really good. And the stem is really thick, so we're not going to be using the stem part. So we're going to be cutting around it. Slice around. And I'm just going to be throwing this part away. And then you just chop it up to however big of chunks you want. And the recipe calls for 3 cups. And if you haven't used kale before, or if it's kind of something new for you and you're like, ew, I don't want to add that. It doesn't taste too good by itself. Some people do like it. But once you put it in the soup, it really softens up and it just tastes really good. So give it a try. It's healthy for you. All right, it is done. And now what we're going to do is called a quick release. And this is going to release all of the built up pressure in there. So you're going to unlatch at the top. Make sure you're out of the way. It blows a lot of hot steam. The steam is slowing down. And if you don't press the cancel button, it'll automatically keep it warm. So the 0 to, it means it's been on warm for 2 minutes, and it will just stay on warm until you press the cancel button. So I'll actually do that. And it will not let you unlock the lid until all of the pressure is out. So don't try to force it open. And I open the lid away from me so I don't get steamed in the face. And you have to be careful with the lid because it collects a lot of water in there from all the steam pressure. So I try to get all that water off by just rotating the lid a little bit. I'm gonna add in the kale. And the last ingredient we're gonna be adding is the coconut milk. For coconut milk, you really need to make sure it's stirred. So I'm gonna pour it in a separate dish. And we're gonna be adding 1/2 cup. I'm also gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper in there just to taste. This is up to you. So one of the mistakes I made is not draining the meat after it was cooked. So there's a lot of fat that's sitting on top. I've been just skimming it with a spoon, trying to pick it up as much as I can. So drain your meat, but let's say that this is a little bit too runny for you and you want a thicker soup. Take a potato masher. Just gently mash it a little bit just to break up the potatoes, and this will help to thicken it up. Let's say it's still too watery for you. Another trick how to thicken it up is take a little bit of the broth into a separate bowl and add a little bit of cornstarch and mix it until there are no clumps, and then add this back to the soup. And I will let this sit a minute and chop up the bacon. The Zuppa Toscana was a big hit. Yes, both the boys got double helpings. I would give it high ratings. The only thing, remember to drain the meat. Definitely cook some bacon to add on top. That really gave it some delicious flavor. The red pepper flakes gave it a really good spice. Just add a little bit because it can get a little bit overpowering. Those were the only 2 things we added on top, and it just really good. Highly recommend. Other than that, I will see you at the next recipe. We are jumping right into the next recipe, which is jambalaya. Starting over here with the meat, I'm going to be using chicken and sausage. The recipe I'm going off of is from lifefamilyfun.com, and I change up a little bit from their recipe. They just use this sausage, so I'm going to be doing both of those meats. You're going to need a few stalks of celery. I used 3, a whole red bell pepper. I used about half of an onion, a white onion, chili powder, garlic, diced tomatoes, also salt and pepper for taste, Creole seasoning. This is our favorite, the Tony's. You're going to need Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce. The recipe calls for chicken broth, but all I have is vegetable broth, and rice. And that is all of the ingredients that I'm going to be using. And this is going to be super easy. I prepped everything in advance, so all we're going to have to do is 2 steps. 8 minutes, boom, done. We are first gonna saute our meats and vegetables. We're hitting that saute. I'll just keep it on beef, medium heat. In goes the meat, onion, celery, and red pepper, and a tablespoon of garlic. And we're not going to be cooking this very long, basically just until the onions become translucent, so between 5 to 8 minutes. Now we are going to add everything else. Can of diced tomatoes. The jambalaya was delicious, very good. Taylor and I actually lived in the South for a couple of years, and jambalaya was something we had very often. But this recipe was the next best thing instead of being in the actual South, where the food down there, it's just really hard to recreate because it's just so damn good. So a couple of things. It was a little bit on the spicier side, and that's because I used a whole tablespoon of the Creole seasoning instead of a teaspoon, which the recipe called for, but I really wanted that Creole seasoning taste, and I liked it, but if you're having little toddlers eat it, it might be too spicy for them. And after the 8 minutes is done, I opened the lid, let it sit for a couple of minutes, gave it a stir, and then put the lid back on and waited about like 6 to 10 minutes for the rice to really soak up that liquid, and it really thickened it up. So just make sure to leave it alone for a little bit after it's done cooking. But other than that, it was very good. Highly recommend. Another great recipe to try. I will see you at the next one. We have come to our last recipe, which is stuffed peppers. And the reason I had this be the last recipe is because you need a little tool. And some of the Power Quick Pot or Instant Pots come with this, but some don't. I got mine on Amazon. I will link it below. But it's originally for cooking eggs. All these little holes around here are to put eggs in here, and then you cook them in the Power Quick Pot, and you can make hard-boiled eggs in there. I did a whole review on that when I reviewed the Power Quick Pot in another video. But anyway, so you're going to need one of these. It's called a trivet. And you're just going to be setting this on here, putting the peppers on top. I'm going to be using some leftover onion from the other recipes. I got 4 variety of bell peppers. You're going to need some cheese. I'm going to be using dairy-free pepper jack style cheese. I'm going to be adding jalapeno. You do not have to add that. I'm going to be using ground beef. You can also use turkey or whatever kind of meat. I'm going to be putting in some black beans, some green chilies, diced tomatoes with green chilies, kind of like a rotel, salt and pepper. We got onion powder, garlic powder, chili powder, cumin. And the recipe I'm going off of is from wellplated.com, and they put rice in theirs, but you'd have to cook it separately and then add it in there. So I don't want to do all that, so I'm just going to be using these ingredients, but you could put quinoa, rice, whatever you would like. Make them your own. All right, let's get started. I have an 8-quart Power Quick Pot, but if you have a 6-quart, it suggests putting 1 cup of water at the bottom, and an 8-quart, 1 1/2 cup water. So I will be doing 1 1/2 cup. You're gonna set the trivet in there just like that. That might be a little high. Let's see, I have 2 different sizes. Yeah, I think that one will be better. After you wash your produce, you're gonna cut the tops off of the peppers and scrape out the inside. So what I find best is to stick my knife in there, cut around in a circular motion, and it'll just pull right out. In a bowl, you are going to combine all the ingredients. So first start out with the meat, then we're going to add the spices, tablespoon of chili powder, teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of onion powder, some salt, and pepper. I'm going to add the can of Rotel or diced tomatoes with green chilies, the can of green chilies, and black beans. I drained and rinsed them. I'm just gonna add maybe about 1/3 of a can, half a can, somewhere around there. I'll add the onion and jalapeno. Last thing, we're gonna add the cheese, and it calls for 1 1/4 cups, and we're gonna mix this up until everything is incorporated. Okay, once you feel like everything is good and mixed, you're gonna load it up in the peppers. We're gonna pressure cook this one, custom, on high for 10 minutes. I have quite a bit left over. I probably could have done another pepper, but I didn't have any, so I will just cook this on the stove and maybe put it in a burrito or something. And for the tops, don't throw them away. There's a lot of good bell pepper still on here, so what I do is I just cut around. And these are good for a snack, dip them in some ranch, whatever you want to do, but look how much I got from those 4 tops. Okay, it is done. I'm gonna cancel that and quick release. So I'm a little skeptical of not cooking the meat first. Oh yeah, they're soft. They're good to go. I'm gonna cut into one and just make sure that the meat is cooked all in the middle. No, the meat is not done. All right, I stirred the insides of each pepper really good. I'm gonna pressure cook it another 5 minutes on high. Much better. The stuffed peppers were very good, but I just wanted to let you know one thing is I would highly suggest pre-cooking everything that I put in that bowl. So the spices, the meat, the vegetables, everything like that. I would pre-cook that in the Instant Pot on saute just for maybe like 5 minutes or so. You don't need to make sure the meat's cooked all the way through, just to get a pre-start on the cooking process. And then take out the filling, put it in the peppers, and then cook it the 10 minutes on high. Because I like my meat more chopped up into little bits, and with cooking it how I did with the meat being uncooked, it was in big chunks, it didn't cook all the way through. So yeah, just pre-cook the meat, easier. But those are the 3 recipes that I have for you guys. I hope you try them out. They were all very good, a good variety of different flavors and cuisine, all that good stuff. So give them a try. Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. But wait.
Before you go, I'll miss you so please subscribe to my channel and like this video.